Is expected to speak any moment now after holding leadership elections. We saw a photo op earlier in Mitch McConnell's office, and we are now expecting the group to come forward and answer a few questions. Some sort of news conference will take place any moment from now, and we will have that for you. But first, Defense Secretary Mattis heading to the border with Mexico to visit with U.S. troops deployed there. Welcome back to America's Newsroom. I'm Sandra Smith.
And I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning, everybody. Mattis expected to arrive soon, McAllen, Texas, as he gets ready to make his way to the Donna border crossing point. There he's going to meet with some of the U.S. troops supporting the Border Patrol. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin picks up the story. She's at the Pentagon. How are you, Jennifer? Good morning.
Hi, Bill. Good morning to you. Defense Secretary Mattis, as you mentioned, is expected to arrive any minute now in Texas. He spoke to reporters en route from Washington, and we should have a readout of those remarks shortly. The 7,000 or so U.S. troops sent to the border will be missing Thanksgiving with their families. There are about 1,000 down on the actual border itself. The Pentagon has been unwilling to answer questions about how much this deployment will cost. Unlike the past, DHS will not be paying for it. The Pentagon will. Early estimates point to a $200 million bill, which some worry will mean less money to fix planes and maintain equipment.
We'll update you on costs as they become known. Obviously, the units executing the border mission have got to report them in up here, but we are capturing the cost.
Unlike a deployment overseas, these troops are not getting combat pay. Their living conditions are very Spartan. Most are living in tents and eating prepackaged MREs, even though fast food and grocery stores are nearby. At first, the name of the mission was made very public, Operation Faithful Patriot. But since the election, the message from top brass here at the Pentagon, drop the name and tell the public the U.S. military is supporting the Border Patrol. The president mentioned the migrant caravan heading to the southern border many times ahead of the midterm elections, but has not mentioned it much since. It's still not clear why the Pentagon took the unusual step of deploying active duty forces and not the National Guard as it has done in the past. 5 of the 39 units deployed to the border are public affairs units, suggesting the Pentagon knows this is more about messaging than reinforcing the border. The orders signed by Secretary Mattis stand to expire on December 15th, indicating, Bill, the troops could be home by Christmas.
Well, that's so therein lies the question. But before being deployed, what was the mission for how long? At this point, it could be mid-December.
That's right.
Jennifer, thank you so much. Jennifer Griffin live from the Pentagon there. We will watch it, and we'll look for James Mattis this hour coming up in McAllen, Texas, and we will take our viewers there live to the U.S. border with Mexico when that happens. In the meantime, there's a lot going on back in Washington at the Capitol, waiting on Senator Mitch McConnell.
We are waiting this opportunity on Capitol Hill after earlier seeing in Mitch McConnell's office the newly elected Republican senators, and now that they've said that they will hold a news conference that was expected to begin at the top of this hour. Looks like things are a little bit delayed, but obviously we would want to listen and take that.
90 minutes ago, if you were with us during our 3-hour telethon, if you were with us 90 minutes ago, you saw Mitch McConnell come out and do a little bit of a photo op, and they had all the brand new senators on the Republican side there, and it was very interesting, Sandra, when you've got Rick Scott in that room, when you've got Mitt Romney from Utah, Josh Hawley from Missouri,
Martha McCallum,
Marsha Blackburn.
Marsha Blackburn,
yeah, right.
sorry.
Well, Martha might have been there, too.
Hi, Martha. That was interesting.
But
got people talking in our ear.
And Mike Braun from Indiana, et cetera. So we're going to see these.
It was a moment.
The point is, there was a question that went out there to Rick Scott about his election in Florida, and the answer went, let's say, undelivered.
Are you still claiming fraud
so
in
I
midterm
imagine
elections?
That question comes up in a moment.
And he turned away.
Another Justice Department issuing a memo of support for Matthew Whitaker. An opinion issued earlier today supports the president's decision to appoint Whitaker as acting AG. Chief Intel correspondent Catherine Herridge picks up the story with more from there. Hello, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Bill, and good morning. The Justice Department released this 20-page opinion last hour backing President Trump's appointment of Matt Whitaker as acting attorney general, relying on the Federal Vacancies Reform Act. Key issue goes to Senate confirmation, and the Department of Legal Counsel, which provides legal guidance to the federal government, found Senate confirmation is not required if the appointment is temporary. Quote, all three branches of government have long recognized the president may designate an acting official to perform the duties of a vacant principal office, including a cabinet office, even when the acting official has not been confirmed. Another key issue, whether the Justice Department's own succession plan should take precedent with the acting AG job falling to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. The Office of Legal Counsel found the president may use the Vacancies Reform Act in place of any agency succession plan if he chooses to do so, and that this authority has been recognized previously and used by Presidents Bush and Obama. With the release of the opinion imminent, the debate on Capitol Hill, as you can imagine, divided along party lines.
Certainly, no significant actions under Whitaker's authority should be taken at the department.
This is a very important job, and I think a lot of the questions involving Mr. Whitaker and the acting AG could be eliminated if we had a nominee. And my understanding is the White House is starting to look into that.
The document dated today also provides new information on the timeline, stating that President Trump got a legal opinion from the Justice Department's Office of Legal Counsel on the Whitaker appointment before these records were made public today, Bill.
Well, Catherine, thank you. Catherine Herridge on
welcome.
that. Stay on it in D.C.
All right, well, Chuck Schumer a short time ago won another term as the Democrats' leader. He is now speaking along with other Democrats. Let's listen.
The healthcare system continues. They continue to pursue their destructive lawsuit to eliminate protections for pre-existing conditions. Costs are made higher and higher. Coverage gets diminished every day because of Republican sabotage. Prescription drugs are out of reach for too many, and the GOP knives are still out for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Republicans jammed through a biased tax bill that rewarded the wealthy and the powerful special interests. But we Democrats were unified in opposition. We made it clear day after day after day that the Republicans were the party that stands for the rich and for the wealthy special interests. And we were the party on the side of middle-class Americans and those struggling to get there. Republicans predicted the tax bill would save their party, lead to enormous victories in the midterms. Turns out they were afraid to even talk about it. In almost all of their campaigns, they didn't mention it. That's because it was so unpopular. And I believe there's a sea change. For 30 years, the powerful, wealthy few who have dictated tax policy on the Republican side, cut the taxes of the rich, and that's a great thing for America, that's over. I think our message, our focus, has put a knife through the heart of that argument. You won't see the Republicans doing that very much anymore. What they did do is explode the deficit. As a result, people saw it as selfish, narrowly focused, dangerous, and irresponsible. And so, with the Senate map wildly tilted in Republicans' favor, we're at worst only one seat worse off than we were when we stood here 2 years ago. And if Bill Nelson wins, which I believe he has a very good chance of doing, we'll be even. When all the votes are counted in Florida, we could be just where we started at the beginning of the 115th Congress, with 48 members, even facing the worst map that we've ever had. We were defending 10 seats that Donald Trump won, much to the surprise of the prognosticators who thought we'd lose a whole bunch of seats. We didn't. But that's the past. Where do Senate Democrats go from here? We're going to be relentlessly focused on the issues that matter to the people. First and foremost, lower health care costs, provide better, stronger coverage. From prescription drugs to premiums, we Democrats are going to continue to press our Republican colleagues for better, more comprehensive health care rather than send costs skyward and help the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical industry.
This is part of the argument. Chuck Schumer and others there flanked on the right and left of him on Capitol Hill. I thought the statement, a knife through the heart of cutting taxes, was quite interesting as Democratic leadership comes back to the Hill. And we're going to see Mitch McConnell and the Republicans come out in a moment. We expected the Republicans first. Not quite sure why the delay is, but Mitch McConnell will be in front of that microphone in a moment. But this is a very interesting argument now that they're trying to build as they head into the new Congress in January, Sandra. And also, look, Elizabeth Warren. She's probably running for president. Bernie Sanders just came off an election run. And there are countless others on the Democratic side who would like to entertain that same idea.
And just sort of getting a sense of where this Democratic leadership is going to go. Schumer talking about the GOP tax bill, exploding the deficit, calling Republicans the party for the rich. And, of course, Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, reelected as the Senate picks for leadership for the next Congress. And this is sort of just getting us a flavor of what is coming next.
Yeah, Mitch McConnell's coming up next, too, so we will hear his argument in a moment. Stand by live for that. 10 minutes past the hour right now here in New York.
Fox News alert on those raging wildfires across California. At least 50 people now killed across the state, while evacuees are looking to the future.
I've been here for 45 years. I'm okay with building again if I help her build, my girlfriend, but this is just different, you know? I can't explain it. I've never seen a fire spread that fast.
Those fires wiping out entire communities. Congressman John Garamendi, who represents the wildfire-ravaged town of Paradise, joins us live in minutes. Complete destruction there.
In a moment, though, Defense Secretary James Mattis will arrive at the border with Mexico. And what role will our troops play now that some members of the caravan have arrived near Tijuana? Thomas Homan, former acting director of ICE, will weigh in live. Coming up next.
Game on. I mean, I think the administration is ready. CBP has, of course, got a lot more resources down there, you know, with the military, building the infrastructure and the fencing. You got a lot more inspectors and asylum officers down there from CIS ready to start these interviews.
At this time, we'll have to see what the future holds. But right now, that's the only mission I have.
Secretary Mattis arriving in Texas just a few moments ago. Later this hour, he'll be meeting with some of the U.S. forces supporting Border Patrol there. As the first of the caravan of migrants already reached the border city of Tijuana, Mexico. Joining us now is Thomas Homan, former ICE acting director and Fox News contributor. Thomas, good to have you on the program this morning. Can you tell us a little bit more about that military mission at the border to which Mattis was referring?
Yeah, I think the military, they're not going to perform law enforcement duties, right? They're there to help the Border Patrol, the infrastructure, the transportation of equipment and personnel, border fencing, reinforcing those entryways where the aliens could enter the country illegally. And what that does is that releases the men and women in the green uniform, the Border Patrol agents, puts more of them on the front line to deal with the immigration issue. So it's a force multiplier. I agree with the president's plan to do this. I've said many times, this president takes border security and national security and the sovereignty of this country very seriously, more than any of the 6 presidents I've ever worked for.
I want to give you a few more details on what we're hearing Mattis said on board the flight down to the border. He said as of last night, there was about 5,900 troops deployed to the border. He also said he anticipates that number could go up to as high as 7,000. But they're just going to give daily updates on those numbers so that they can stay more accurate. Do you think that's needed?
I would say probably, depending on the situation on the border. But I've been asked that question. I say, well, is it too much? I say, what's too much? We're securing our border. We're protecting our nation. It's better to overplan and overrespond than underplan and underrespond. We're talking about our nation's security, and we got to make sure we know who these people are. If they're entering illegally, we got to make sure we arrest them and identify them, because one thing people don't talk about, the cartel sent a large group of people through one sector. they're sending drugs and people that want to really harm this country to another sector because the Border Patrol is all tied up. That's what the military and the border is going to help with, because more Border Patrol agents are going to be on that border, so when they get tied up over there, they still got resources to respond over here. So this is a great plan by the president. I support it 100%.
I want to give you some more details on exactly what we're learning Secretary Mattis just said, talking about the military coming in contact with the migrants when they do get to the border. He said presently that they do not, quote, anticipate military personnel coming in direct contact with the migrants. He went on to say that military police are the only military personnel who will provide force protection for those service members supporting the mission at the border. Thomas.
Well, again, I don't think the military are going to be performing law enforcement duties. That'd be a big change. But look, we got the most professional workforce down there. The men and women of the Border Patrol, American patriots, they're very good at this job. They take care. These families do get arrested. They take great care of these families, these kids. A job they didn't sign up for. But for a Border Patrol agent to change diapers, prepare formula, take care of these families, these are really good professional people. In our military, we got the most professional military on the planet. So I think, regardless of what may occur down there, we have the best of the best in the world that's going to respond to this issue.
And just another quick update for our viewers. DHS officials are now telling Fox News that they are aware that a breakaway group of a few hundred migrants from the caravan have arrived at the Tijuana border. So we'll keep track of all of that. Meanwhile, Thomas Homan, I don't have to tell you, your name has been in the news a lot lately, not just for border security, but as a possible replacement for DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen. I know that you have praised her leadership. Is there any such thing happening, or is that in the works?
I can't speculate on what the president may or might do, but we have a secretary right now, and she's working very, very hard. And we have to salute her, because she stepped up to the plate. And it's a life-changing job. She has no personal life. This is 365, 24/7, and taking hits every day. She's working hard. I just think we need to stand by her. The president makes the decision, then we'll stand by it. But until then, we have a secretary.
Just a few seconds left. How would you describe your relationship with the president?
I think we had a great relationship. I respect him greatly. I mean, I think he respects me to the point look, I didn't come to this game as a politician. I come up through the ranks. I was the first ICE director to come up through the ranks. I know what it's like to wear the green uniform. I know what it's like to be a special agent. I never ask anybody in that 20,000-man agency to do something I didn't do myself. So he listens to me when it comes to immigration issues. I certainly appreciate his stance on this issue. He takes border security seriously, and he supports law enforcement at such an incredible level. I truly respect this president. My greatest honor was working for this president and leading the men and women of ICE for the year and a half I did.
Thomas Homan, thank you for your time this morning, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
The attorneys for the president now said to be getting closer to answering questions from the Mueller team. Does that mean the end is in sight on the Russia investigation? New insight coming up shortly. After CNN sues President Trump and several top aides over stripping Jim Acosta's White House credential. The network citing a violation of the Fifth and First Amendment. Howard Kurtz, Fox News media analyst and host of Media Buzz, is with me now. Howie, how you doing? Good morning to you. Let's take our viewers through. It's a quickly developing story. There was a court case this morning at 11 a.m. There's a hearing set for 3:30 this afternoon. Where are we on this, Howie?
At this hearing, we'll get the first look at whether a federal judge is going to take seriously CNN's claims of constitutional violations in the White House decision, the president's decision to retaliate against Jim Acosta. But this sort of underscores, I think this suit is more of a PR effort than a legal one. I don't know we're going to get a profound ruling out of this, because it casts CNN and its president, Jeff Zucker, as kind of champions of the free press. And this is why I think the White House stripping the credentials was a strategic error, because it took the spotlight off of Acosta constantly interrupting, refusing to give up the microphone in that incident last week, and turned him into something of a journalistic martyr. And it's caused a lot of people in the news business who may not necessarily like or approve of Jim Acosta's behavior to try to back what CNN is doing.
What I've heard from the White House is that there are 50 other staffers at CNN who still have access. So they're arguing it's not a violation of First Amendment because the network still has access to the West Wing. Sarah Sanders' statement. Here we go. Howie, I'll let you answer this. She says, "We have been advised that CNN has filed a complaint challenging the suspension of Jim Acosta's hard pass. This is just more grandstanding from CNN, and we will vigorously defend against this lawsuit. The First Amendment is not served when a single reporter of more than 150 present attempts to monopolize the floor. If there is no check on this type of behavior, it impedes the ability of the president, the White House staff, and members of the media to conduct business, end quote. Howie, go.
Yeah, that's why Acosta is a divisive figure, even among some of his White House colleagues. But the key thing here is that Sarah Sanders has now dropped her original explanation about him laying hands on the young White House intern who tried to take the mic away at the president's direction. I think that was always kind of a red herring. And as far as the grandstanding, that is the White House view. But at the same time, we have to recognize that even though CNN has a big team covering the White House, as many organizations do, no news organization wants to be in a position where the president seems to dictate who can have access, who can cover. I think there's just a natural tendency to say that crosses a line.
Now, well, we are involved in this as well right now. Jay Wallace, president of Fox News, put out a statement just about an hour ago. It reads this: Fox News supports CNN in its legal effort to regain its White House reporter's press credential. We intend to file an amicus brief with the U.S. District Court. Secret Service passes for working White House journalists should never be weaponized. While we don't condone the growing antagonistic tone by both the president and the press at recent media avails, we do support a free press, access, and open exchanges for the American people, end quote there. And I'm just seeing that NBC has joined as well on this a moment ago. Howie.
I think the key phrase in the Fox statement is about not supporting the tone on either side, because it signals that while the president has certainly been very vociferous in the last week, especially in attacking individual journalists as well as Jim Acosta, that there are excesses on the media side as well. But this shows with the networks falling into line, it's not that they particularly approve of Jim Acosta. In fact, there's been a lot of criticism from me and others of Acosta on this network. But it shows that with the White House drawing this line in the sand, prompting CNN to file the suit, other news organizations feel like they've got to stand up for the journalistic principle. A lot of people, at the same time, I think CNN is convincing many Trump supporters that not only does it seem to be often journalistically opposed to the president, but is now legally fighting him as well. It's become the story.
Let's see if that legal fight continues. Thank you, Howie Kurtz there in Washington. Thank you, Howie. Sandra.
Republicans set to vote on who will be GOP House Minority Leader in the new session. Our next guest has just been elected to a second term. He says Congress is broken, and he's offering a solution to fix it.
Also, President Trump's lawyers getting close to handing special counsel Bob Mueller written answers in the Russia matter. Is the Mueller case close to wrapping up?
Heard a short time ago from Chuck Schumer and Senate Democratic leadership. So Republicans' turn. When they step up to that microphone, we will take that live for you.
Meanwhile, on the House side, Republicans, they will hold their leadership elections for the minority half an hour from now. Wisconsin Republican Congressman Mike Gallagher is with me now. How you doing, sir? Congratulations on your reelection. Upstate Wisconsin, Green Bay. Tells me you're a Packers fan. Here's what you write, okay? Here's your headline. When I was elected to the House of Representatives 2 years ago, I found the problems were not as bad as I'd expected. They were worse. End quote. Explain.
Well, I think you have to look at the way in which the institution has evolved. Really, two things have happened. One, Congress has systematically surrendered most of its power to the executive branch. We've put most of the federal government on autopilot. We've given up our power of the purse. And the second thing is, within the institution, power has really gone from the committees and the individual members and has been tightly concentrated within leadership. And therefore, every 2 years, we have people that complain about the lack of regular order, but we seem unable to fix it. And so I think regardless of who's in charge, which party, which personality, we have to fix the institution, get it working again, getting it doing things like basic oversight, passing budgets on time, and getting individual members to channel their ambition not into raising money, not into getting famous on TV, but rather just doing their basic job in the halls of Congress.
Would you expect that under a leadership that's run by Nancy Pelosi and Democrats soon?
Well, I do worry that they're going to be inexorably drawn further and further left. I worry that the next 2 years is going to get consumed by just attacking Trump. And I think most people, even if they're not the biggest fans of Trump, at least most people that I talk to in the middle in Northeast Wisconsin, just want Congress to do its job, just want it to operate efficiently, and want us to have good faith disagreements about the big issues of the day rather than punting those to the next generation. So I really hope that my friends in the other party don't go down that path, and I'm willing to work with them over the next 2 years to ensure that we restore this institution and we restore a legislature the American people can be proud of.
You're about 24 months months into your new career there. You sound like a disappointed American politician.
Well, listen, I think there's a lot of recognition among the newer, younger members that we can be doing better. I hear a lot about people from both sides of the aisle that they want real structural reforms. And I would argue that unless we want to keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again, we got to make some changes. So I'm not disappointed. I'm motivated to fix the way Washington, D.C. operates, to devolve more power and authority back down to the states, to the local level, where we can be held accountable better. And so I think this is a generational challenge, and I'm willing to work with anyone to fix the institution in D.C.
Okay. You've got a lot of new members, especially on the Democratic side, that were calling races late last night in California, races that flipped, went from red to blue. What do you think a week later as to what the midterm results told you in the GOP?
Well, listen, I think this was within the historical average of it's sort of regressing to the mean and it always being hard for the president's party in a midterm. But I do think we need to do some soul searching. I think we need a better message on health care. I think we need an aggressive drain the swamp message. Indeed, some of the reforms I'm talking about in this piece are geared towards exactly that. And that can bring people from the far left and the far right together. And we should always be in the business of trying to expand our conservative message, bring newer, younger members into that coalition. And so that's the conversation we need to have right now to prepare for the future.
What is the message on health care? And I ask you that because Chuck Schumer 25 minutes ago was talking about that very thing. The other thing he said is that Democrats have put a knife through the heart of any future ideas about cutting taxes for Americans.
Well, that's a shame. Listen, and I think it was absolutely disgraceful the way in which health care was demagogued in this election. We had people running ads against Republicans, basically accusing them of wanting to kill 22 million people. That's disgraceful. That brings us further away from a solution. I think a good starting point is in the price transparency space. I think everyone can agree that until we as patients understand what we're paying for in the healthcare system, we're not going to have any of the power. And then going forward, we need to allow the states to have some flexibility to experiment with different delivery systems, because what works for me in Green Bay, Wisconsin is going to be different than what works for you in Manhattan, let alone L.A. or San Francisco. This is a big, diverse country, and we have to empower the laboratories of democracy to understand what works and what doesn't over the long term.
Well, Mike Gallagher, thanks for coming by. Big day today there on the Hill. Thank you, sir, the Republican from Wisconsin.
Thank you.
President Trump's legal team making some progress on its response to special counsel Robert Mueller. The president's lawyers finalizing answers to written questions. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts live from the North Lawn. John, what more do we know about this?
Sandra, good morning to you. What we do know is that this has been a long and tortuous pas de deux, but it appears to be coming to a close. Sources tell Fox News that the president and the president's attorneys are at the point now where they are comfortable submitting written answers to questions to the special counsel Robert Mueller. Negotiations have gone back and forth over the parameters of an interview, how it would happen, what the president would answer. This goes all the way back to November 21st of 2017. Mueller first wanted a lengthy sit-down interview, eventually agreeing to just written answers to questions. He also had a list of 49 questions for the president that his legal team obtained back in early March. They've whittled that down now to substantially less questions than 49. Mueller also had a bucket full of questions about obstruction of justice. But I'm told that the answers that will likely be submitted to Mueller by the end of the week deal only with Russia and possible collusion. We do not know the exact number of questions that are being answered here, but I'm told that it's much less than the original 49. When they were negotiating the parameters for an interview back in the late spring, this probably would have been late April, early May, the president's attorneys wanted a reasonable assurance from Robert Mueller that if they did submit the president to an interview, that Robert Mueller would soon thereafter wrap up the Russia part of his investigation. So it may be now they have reached an agreement that Mueller is about to wrap up his investigation, at least into Russia and possible collusion, and that the president is willing to give answers in order to satisfy any outstanding questions that Mueller might have. I'm told that the president is willing to still sit down for an interview. His counsel has counseled him against doing that, but the president, I'm told, just wants to get this all over with.
John, what more are we hearing about the First Lady's office calling for the dismissal of a staffer?
Well, what we're hearing about is that this could get ugly, and it could get ugly pretty quickly. Remember back in the Reagan era, Nancy Reagan was pretty forceful in terms of being outspoken, protecting her husband. But even during that period of time, we never had the First Lady's office actually come out and call for the firing of a staff member. Mira Ricardel, who is the chief of staff for the National Security Council, was seen yesterday, there she is with the blonde hair, at an event with the president. As this was going on, the First Lady's office put out a statement saying, quote, "It is the position of the office of First Lady that she, Ricardel, no longer deserves the honor of serving in this White House." Again, she's John Bolton, the National Security Advisor's chief of staff. She sort of plays bad cop to his good cop. She's got sharp elbows. She's not afraid to get up in somebody's face. She's a veteran of the Rumsfeld Pentagon, has clashed with many members of the cabinet, is disliked by, I'm told, most people around here at the White House, but she is very much liked by one person, John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, and he apparently is willing to go to the mat with her. So we'll see how all of this works out, Sandra, but I'm told by people who know about this whole situation that this could get ugly, and it could get ugly fast. We'll see.
We'll see where that goes. John Roberts, thank you very much.
So California has seen the deadliest wildfire ever for that state, burning in Northern California. At least 48 have been killed there. There are hundreds still unaccounted for. That number could change, unfortunately. California Congressman John Garamendi represents the hardest hit area, and he's going to give us an update from his perch there in Washington coming up here shortly.
Any minute now, we are expecting to hear from Senator Mitch McConnell. Senate Republicans just holding leadership elections for the upcoming term, and as soon as he begins speaking, we will go to that live. Stay tuned.
It happened so quickly. You know, we had trained for this for years and years and years. We knew Paradise would burn. You know, it wasn't, is it going to burn? It's just a matter of time. You know, when will it burn and how bad will it burn? And this is beyond, any comprehension. This was the ultimate firestorm. You know, the conditions were, it was a perfect firestorm.
The so-called campfire still burning north of Sacramento. The wildfire killing at least 48 people and devastating the town of Paradise. Democratic Congressman John Garamendi represents the district devastated by the fire. He joins us now. Congressman, thanks for coming on. You have been meeting with first responders, families of victims. How are things at this moment?
Terrible. Absolutely horrible, horrible situation. 26,000 people in that community. The community is essentially gone. 48 dead. Quite likely there'll be more. Devastation, horrible. Use whatever word you want to describe just hell on earth, and that's exactly what happened to these people. So how are we going to go forward? Well, fortunately, the federal government is going to be providing assistance through the presidential disaster declaration. That's helpful. There will be some assistance for them. Rebuilding is going to take a long time to put this community back together.
What is that going to take? I mean, what sort of resources? I mean, as you're talking, Congressman, from Washington, we're looking at these images coming out of Paradise, just absolute complete devastation, and obviously the loss of life and still those that are unaccounted for. This is not over, and it's far from over.
Well, that's exactly right. Well, the community will be putting itself back together, and how they rebuild that community is going to be extremely important. It's going to have to be built in a resilient, fire-safe way. That particular area, the geography of the area, the ridge on which it was located, as you started this segment, laying out that it was an area that was subject to a fire just 6 years ago. Fortunately, it didn't get into the town, just some of the outskirts. So how to build resiliently. We do have an interesting piece and a useful piece of legislation, that a bicameral piece of legislation dealing with evacuation planning. That planning has to be not only the police and fire, how to get people out of town, but also it's an infrastructure issue, not just for this community, but for really any community that's subject to these kinds of devastations, whether it's a hurricane, earthquake, tornado, or in the case of California and other communities, fires. What are the way out? What kind of roads do need to be put in place? What kind of clearings near those roads. These are all things we must consider going forward. And of course, individual families will be receiving some assistance. The Small Business Administration will be helping businesses as well as homeowners get back on their feet. One big issue, and this comes from my history as insurance commissioner in California, is make the insurance companies fully honor their contract with the homeowners.
Congressman, it is something that we are all watching, and I know that you have inspirational stories as well that has come out of this complete devastation, and we'll continue to watch all of this, and those firefighters still risking their lives as these flames continue to spread. Meanwhile, back to business in Washington, with now Democrats controlling the House. A lot of talk about strategy and what lies ahead, and can Democrats work with Republicans and President Trump? As far as Nancy Pelosi and her bid to return as Speaker of the House, how do you feel about that, and do you support her?
Well, I am a supporter of Nancy Pelosi. I think she's done an incredible job for more than 2 decades, well, 2 decades to be sure, in leadership roles. And she led our caucus to a really very significant victory in this election. She will almost certainly become our Speaker. Now, what are we going to do in that position? She's been very, very clear this morning in our own caucus that we're going to carry out the promises that we made in the election, that we're going to develop policies for the people, particularly for the middle class. We're talking about income, increasing the opportunity for people to earn income, and that's education, job training, certainly the infrastructure, which I spoke to just a moment ago, all aspects of it. For rural California, places like Paradise, we need broadband and cellular service, much of which is not available in that area. And, of course, the health care issue. We will secure for every insurance policy in America that there will be no discrimination based on pre-existing conditions. People would be guaranteed to be able to get their health care and not pay a whopping sum just because they have a pre-existing condition.
We've got to leave it there. A lot of breaking news coming in these few hours, and we appreciate your time this morning as you return to Washington. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Down to the border we go. Texas and Mexico waiting on James Mattis. He's arrived there at the Donna border crossing near McAllen, Texas, which is west and slightly north of Brownsville. So we're watching his arrival. We should get comments in a moment. U.S. military has been deployed down there, and talking with Jennifer Griffin, the Pentagon, 30 minutes ago, it seems as if the order is to extend for at least a month into mid-December. So we'll see what the assignment is and what James Mattis has to say as our coverage continues. In a moment here on America's Newsroom. Come on back right after this.
At the Joseph A. Bank Black Friday sale,
Watch this story. Middle East, the Israeli defense minister resigning in protest over the ceasefire that's been reached between Israel and Hamas over Gaza. This after hundreds of rockets have been fired into southern Israel. Trey Yinks back in that story live in Jerusalem. And where does this stand now, Trey?
Well, hi there, Bill. The Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman resigning unexpectedly this morning here in Jerusalem in protest to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to strike a ceasefire agreement with Hamas. Lieberman also calling today for early elections in Israel, putting more pressure on the current prime minister. The resignation comes amid protests in the southern Israeli city of Sderot, where residents are demanding that the Israeli government take a harder stance against Hamas, the group in control of the Gaza Strip. Earlier this week, after a botched Israeli intelligence operation, Hamas and other Gazan factions fired more than 400 rockets into southern Israel, killing one person. The Israelis responded with a series of airstrikes in Gaza. Now the resigning defense minister is calling the ceasefire signing and previous allowance of payments to Hamas a capitulation to terror. Take a listen.
As far as I'm concerned, what happened yesterday's ceasefire, together with the entire process of reaching an agreement with Hamas, is a capitulation to terror.
Now, as pressure continues to increase on the prime minister here in Jerusalem, Hamas is claiming victory for Lieberman's resignation. Something of note here, though, Bill, the parliamentary majority for Netanyahu is definitely in jeopardy following this decision of resignation, because with Lieberman's party gone, it narrows the majority for Netanyahu to just one. Bill?
Trey Yinks, thank you. Watching all that. We hope the violence is kept to a minimum. Let's hope. Trey, thank you.
Another Fox News alert for you. At the moment, Secretary Mattis is at the base camp where Secretary Mattis is being briefed by leadership. We are told he was just briefed by leadership inside a tent at the base camp. Mattis headed down to the U.S.-Mexico border today, meeting with military service members in support of the administration's military mission at the southwest border. You're looking at Kirstjen Nielsen, DHS Secretary. Obviously, all of this with the backdrop of what is happening next with her in that position. But there is James Mattis at the border getting briefed by members of the military.
She has spent a lot of time down there the past couple of weeks and bringing reporters along as well, inspecting what's happening up and down the border. If you went further west by several thousand miles, you'd find yourself in Tijuana. And that is apparently where one of these migrant caravans has now moved. And that would be near a port of entry, which is what the White House has said has to be the legal definition by which you can seek asylum or even apply for it. So, in other words, they were saying no more border jumping. You have to go to a legal port of entry. So we're watching that caravan as a few others trail behind it.
As far as the update that we've received so far from Mattis at the border, on his way down, he confirmed that there are 59 troops currently deployed to the border. He did anticipate that that number could go up to as high as 7,000. But he said he'll give daily updates on that to try to stay accurate. But a lot of talk about the military at the border, what exactly their role will be as far as when the migrants make it there, Bill, and the contact that the military will have with those migrants. Secretary Mattis, just a short time ago, saying presently he does not anticipate military personnel coming into direct contact with the migrants. So Kirstjen Nielsen and Secretary Mattis at the border there.
As the briefing continues, get a quick break. Come on back right after this.